The implosion, the collapse of the FTX crypto exchange. Well, now their disgraced former CEO, after he resigned, Sam Bankman-Fried, otherwise known as SBF, speaking out just yesterday in this major interview at the New York Times' DealBook Summit. Andrew Ross Sorkin interviewing SBF virtually, SBF in the Bahamas, as we speak about what went wrong. So many questions remain about how such a huge company, $32 billion in value, could have collapsed overnight. And so here you can see just some video of SBF there. We also have just a very quick soundbite of him answering some of the questions from Andrew Ross Sorkin just yesterday. Let's listen.
Clearly, I made a lot of mistakes or things I would give anything to be able to do over again. I didn't ever try to commit fraud on anyone. I was excited about the prospects of FTX a month ago. I saw it as a thriving, growing business. I was shocked by what happened this month, and reconstructing it. Where there are things I wish I had done differently.
All right, you heard it there. He said there are things he wishes he would have done differently. Well, earlier today, I spoke with a Wall Street Journal reporter, Alexander Saidi. He was in the room as this interview was going on. We spoke to him about some of the statements SBF made, what this means for the crypto industry, and what SBF's criminal liability is. Will he be held to account? Let's listen.
It really began at the beginning of November, so it hasn't even been a full month since a company once estimated in the tens of billions of dollars of value is, facing bankruptcy in the United States and liquidation abroad. And it's a kind of somewhat of a complicated, but also somewhat simple story for how we got here. There were reports that came out about a hedge fund that is owned by Sam Bankman-Fried called Alameda Research that's affiliated with the customer platform FTX that allows everyday customers to buy and sell cryptocurrencies and trade them with one another. And reports came out that Alameda Research had been taking large, risky bets that were backstopped by customer deposits coming out of FTX. The Wall Street Journal reported that, I believe, in early mid-November, and slowly people started to lose their confidence in the company, doubting whether or not they were able to get their money back, and pulled lots of cash from the platform in a faster rate than FTX was able to hope to reimburse them. And as the spiraling of the company continued, Sam Bankman-Fried eventually resigned, and a new CEO has taken over, and he filed the company for bankruptcy around, just on or around November 11th, I think. And since then, we've been kind of picking up the pieces and understanding, is there a path for customers to get their money back? There's going to be a different treatment for American customers versus international customers. There's been some bickering between entities in the Bahamas, which is where FTX had its principal core operations, and the entities in the United States, which filed for bankruptcy protection and have accused entities in the Bahamas of stealing money from the bankrupt estate. So there's still a lot of open questions, but yesterday marked the first time that Sam Bankman-Fried very publicly addressed in a live Q&A format what his responsibility might have been for the downfall and what he thinks the path forward would be.
Yeah, Alexander, a lot of jokes were going on social media and Twitter yesterday when this interview was happening about, what his lawyers must be thinking. Did his lawyers even sign off on this? And many had thought they were quite apoplectic over some of the answers that SBF was giving. Was that your view?
SBF said that his lawyers did not advise him to go or to speak. And he spoke out of what he called a moral imperative to explain what went wrong to the best of his knowledge. And, he sort of spelled out what he claims to have known went wrong at FTX. And he knows there are multiple criminal probes open against him and that he's facing regulatory scrutiny. It's time will tell whether or not, the fact that he didn't know anything allegedly will play into his ultimate, innocence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the questions centered around the commingling of funds with Alameda Research. Do you think he answered that question sufficiently? He was, quite upfront. He said, "I didn't knowingly commingle funds,"
Right.
and I was struck by the fact that he admitted he did not know how big Alameda's position was, how large it was. So that was surprising to me.
Yeah, no, he repeated those types of statements, that he didn't know how much money, customer money, had potentially been routed through Alameda. He said he had no idea the extent to which Alameda had borrowed money to take levered bets that, in his view, were collateralized. So meaning if the trade had to be unwound, there would be a package of assets that could be liquidated to make sure people on both sides of the transaction get made whole. But another issue is that he didn't fully account for the fact that the value of the collateral, which isn't a treasury bond or a AAA rated piece of regulated debt, it's a cryptocurrency asset. So in theory, the thing that's securing all these transactions is itself quite prone to major volatile swings. And he sort of said, probabilistically, we didn't think that, all of the assets inside of the FTX complex would drop in value by 50% or 60%. And he repeated over and over again, saying they didn't see this coming. They weren't aware of how much risk they had taken on, and they weren't aware of how companies within the FTX orbit were interrelated with one another and had, amounts due from one to the other, and they didn't really know where the money had come from and how to balance their own intercompany accounts. Yeah. So there was just a lot of striking statements about what was not known, and that is ultimately to the detriment of the company, because it unwound as a result of these risks that played out against them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was struck by that as well. SBF, time and time again during the interview, kept reiterating the fact that, he only had the information available to him at the time. Now, obviously, he's shut out from a lot of the data because he's resigned as CEO. But I think a lot of people don't realize as well as FTX has some more than 100 kind of entities under that umbrella, Alameda being one of them. And so you can kind of see SBF using that as maybe an excuse for why he might not have known everything that is going on. Also, back to Alameda briefly, do you think he was throwing the CEO, Caroline Ellison, kind of under the bus there when he said, he didn't really know how, leverage, how much of a large position Alameda was in for?
Yeah, she was never directly mentioned, but as he repeated over and over again that he didn't know anything or wasn't aware, he never addressed whether or not maybe somebody was aware. That was sort of an unspoken question in a way. And he also repeatedly stressed that he was focused on building out the FTX brand, lobbying in Washington. He also had a lot of interesting comments to say about, why he was such a big advocate for crypto and on Capitol Hill. And, he wasn't necessarily focused on the day-to-day risk management of the platform, as he was, by his own admission, distracted by other ventures or other growth paths for FTX, where he was increasingly a figurehead for the organization as opposed to a day-to-day manager, perhaps. And so yeah, it remains to be seen what Caroline Ellison will have to say. She hasn't made any public statements since the firm's collapse, and she was the head of Alameda Research, which is very much at the center of FTX's breakdown and the controversy surrounding it.
Yeah, and I was also struck by the fact that, SBF was kind of almost operating under the assumption that, things might be normal, at least with the U.S. operations, that they can still exchange, that they still can transact. He says the U.S. platform is fully solvent. He says withdrawals could be opened up today. Is he living in a fantasy? Is that even true?
It's hard for me to say. The U.S. debtors have been locating cash, trying to understand where any money that's inside of the FTX complex might be. FTX US and FTX International were always organized very separately. They have different forms of registration with regulatory authorities. Most of the international business was entirely run out of the Bahamas. So that's going to be a different path for those customers to get made whole. He seemed to suggest that there may have been more commingling with international customers' money than U.S. customers, but we don't have enough details yet. I think the FTX US is now under the control of the bankrupt entities that filed for Chapter 11 in Delaware. They have essentially put a ring fence around the company's assets and are just trying to establish, what do we have, what's missing, how can we locate what's not here? And I think that process is going to play out before anybody can take money, because when you have a financial meltdown of this nature, you can't just sort of willingly open the floodgates to a select group of people, while others who have potentially rightful claims on the estate won't get access to money. So the bankruptcy is designed to have an orderly process for everyone to get paid back. So it is possible that all the creditors will be made whole on the US side. It may just take some time, given the amount of legal problems the company has, for that money to go back to them.
Yeah, I mean, you cover bankruptcies all the time. This is going to be massive. This could take years, if not decades. And then I just lastly want to get your thoughts. He was asked about what he thinks his criminal liability might be. A lot of people on Twitter after the interview wrapped up as well, kind of going back and forth on whether or not they thought SBF was telling the truth. He was quite contrite, though, at the beginning. He said, I made a lot of mistakes. He would give anything to do it over again. But then he said he was shocked by what happened this month. So you have all these kind of competing emotions, viewpoints that SBF kind of put on full display yesterday during this. Do you think he has criminal liability, and what will you be looking for in the days and weeks to come?
So we know from statements by FTX's lawyers in court and public statements from regulators around the world that there are a number of open probes relating to FTX, Alameda, and the managers and directors of those companies. There will be certainly jurisdictional problems at play. Most of FTX's operations were in the Bahamas. The exchange was run through the Bahamas. Sam Bankman-Fried is presently in the Bahamas, and the Bahamian regulators have said they are looking into potential criminal charges. So we may see similar types of things come from the Department of Justice or from the SEC, but again, because of the global nature of the business and the international location of Sam Bankman-Fried and his associates, it may be more complex than a similar situation that would have only played out on US soil, because you have questions of international law that start to intermesh with domestic criminal or civil liability. So I'll be looking to see, will there be more cooperation between global authorities on this, or are they going to try to essentially run the show themselves? And we have seen thus far that cooperation among authorities has appeared relatively limited thus far, if not outright acrimonious. So I'll be looking to see how that plays out over time, but no certainty just yet.
Yeah, and me personally, I'll just be looking out to see if SBF or anyone else does any more interviews or anyone from the company speaks out. There's a lot we still don't know.
Alexander Saidi, we appreciate your time, and we'll talk again.
Thank you very much.